Hello 8th graders. In this IXL support video we're going to be taking a look at assignment Y8, which is called Write a Linear Equation from a Slope and Y-Intercept. And the whole key for this assignment on Y8 is to understand our formula slope-intercept form. This simple equation y equals mx plus b can work for every linear relationship we have. Once we know the slope and y-intercept, the m just becomes slope and the b just becomes y-intercept. So let's see what we mean here. For the first problem, they tell us a line has a slope of 5. So I'm going to go ahead and put a box around that. They said a slope of 5. And we also get told that the y-intercept is going to be 9. And they ask us to write the equation, or what is its equation in slope-intercept form. So the key here, you see they're helping us out in the beginning. They give us the formula set up a little bit. Whatever the m is, the slope will multiply with x, and whatever the b is, the y-intercept will be added or subtracted by itself. So in this case, it's just a matter of plugging in the slope of 5 and the y-intercept of positive 9. So for the next problem, they tell us that the line's y-intercept is -7. I'm going to put a green box around that because that's the y-intercept, the plus b part. And they tell us that the slope is going to be positive 6. I'm going to put a purple box around that. So here it's important to remember the slope. Even if they tell us the slope second, the slope is always going to be the rate of change. It needs to multiply with the x or be the coefficient with x. So we're going to put a 6 there. And they also tell us the y-intercept is -7. But I don't want to put a -7 in this box here because they've already listed the negative or accounted for the negative by using a subtraction. Subtraction, negative, they mean the same thing. So instead, I'm going to recognize if the y-intercept's -7 and they're already subtracting, all I need is a positive 7. If I put a -7, you may remember from 7th grade, that would actually mean subtracting a negative, which means addition. It would actually make your y-intercept positive if you put a -7 in that box. So the next question, again, they list the y-intercept first. They tell us the y-intercept is -4. They tell us the slope is 8, so it's just a matter of plugging in the 8 for the slope. And since the y-intercept's negative, recall they're subtracting, so we've already accounted for the negative piece of the y-intercept, and we're just going to put a positive 4 in the box since the subtraction sign is already here. As always, as these questions pop up, we would encourage you to kind of try to pause the video or think about it yourself at first. We're going to skip ahead a little bit to a couple tougher problems, and then that'll be the end of this video. But we think you're in very good shape right now to work through this on your own. Maybe here's the first somewhat tougher problem. The slope is no longer an integer or a whole number. They tell us the slope is the fraction 1/4, and that the y-intercept is positive 2. So go ahead and think about what should that equation be, and hopefully most of you are recognizing whether the slope is a fraction or an integer, a ratio or a whole number. I'm just going to multiply that slope with x, and in this case the slope is 1/4, so I put 1/4 as my fraction. Put the positive 2 in for the y-intercept, and again we're going to skip forward here one more time to find some problems that are a little more difficult. Alright, so as you progress in this assignment, and again, we think you're in great shape, maybe you don't need to be watching this video anymore, but if you're still watching, if you're trying to get some help on the challenge zone or tougher ones, the more difficult ones will actually make you write the whole equation. So if you just recall that y equals mx plus b is our key, I'm going to put that as my placeholder in here actually. This y equals mx plus b formula is always going to be one great way I can easily write equations if I know the slope and the y-intercept for the line. So here they tell us that the slope is 1/2, so I'm simply going to, I'll put a box around that first, I guess. And they tell us that the y-intercept is going to be 0. Kind of interesting. So I'm going to replace the m first. I know the slope is 1/2, so I'll just delete the m in place, or substitute a 1/2 in for the place of m. And if the y-intercept is 0, I can go ahead and replace the plus b with plus 0. But most of you might be saying, Mr. Doherty, plus 0 is kind of weird to write. It's also a waste of time. It's inefficient because adding 0 doesn't change anything. And we may say here, this is going to go through the origin. It's a proportional line. And the proportional lines are simpler. They just go y equals mx because their y-intercept is 0. We don't have a plus b part. And that may look familiar now from 7th grade. One final example we're going to show you here. We're going to show two more, this one and then one from the challenge zone. Again, we don't think you need this anymore, but if you're still with us taking a look, here you might see the slope is 9 over 2. You might see the y-intercept is -5, so we would set our placeholder up if we need that, y equals mx plus b, and then we can substitute into that formula. 9 over 2 is our slope that replaces or substitutes out the m, and then -5 is our y-intercept, and that's just going to go ahead and replace the y-intercept. I like to simplify further. IXL would take this, but adding a negative is really just like subtraction. And I think it's a little easier to just write that as 9 over 2x minus 5. But IXL would take plus a -5. They mean the same thing. One final question will show us. We'll jump in the challenge zone to see if it looks any different, but I think it's very similar. Oh, and there are a few ways they can make it more challenging. This is one example. So they give us a slope of 0, a y-intercept of -6. I'm going to, again, if I'm not sure how to write this equation immediately, I'm going to start with my placeholder, my formula mx plus b. And I know the slope is 0, so I'm going to plug in the 0 for m, 0 times x. I know the y-intercept is a -6, so I'm going to go ahead and call that a subtract 6 instead of an add 6. And I also understand something about math. Anytime I multiply by 0, it doesn't matter what the number is. Any value I pick for x, anything times 0 will just be 0, so we don't need that. If the slope is 0, it means y never gets bigger or smaller. It just remains the same. And in this case, if the y-intercept was -6, we had a slope of 0, it's just going to stay flat with a y value of -6 for all of time. We think that's quite enough for you. If you did watch to the end, thank you for hanging in there, and thank you for the strong work on Y8.